Greetings again everyone, and it's about time I tested out the Fuji XF 16mm f1.4 as you see here. It's only for Fuji's X-mount system cameras, where it offers the full frame equivalent field of view of 24mm, so it's lovely and wide, and that very bright maximum aperture of f1.4 ensures you'll be happily shooting away in darker situations too, and even be able to get some out of focus backgrounds in your images despite the wide angle. It's a very expensive lens at $1,000 US, or a little over £800 here in the UK. I'm a bit behind the times with this lens, as it was launched as far back as 2015. I'm not sure if Fuji were even making 24 megapixel cameras at that point, and at the time it was the brightest 16mm lens ever made, if I'm not mistaken. Fuji users seem to love this lens, but the more technical reviews of it that I've seen seem to be very mixed, painting a picture of a lens that's pretty soft at its widest apertures. Well, we'll take a look at technical image quality a bit later, but first let's check out its build quality. This is one of Fuji's highest tier XF lenses, thus its build quality is pretty much second to none, with lots of metal used in its body throughout, not to mention weather sealing. At 375 grams, it's not heavy, but it does have a nice little weight to it. We also get one of Fuji's clicking aperture rings toward the rear of the lens. Fuji spent the earlier years of their X system offerings experimenting with different designs, and something distinctive about this lens is its manual focus ring. Pull it down to engage manual focus, where it turns very smoothly with hard stops at either end, and the electronic focus motor tries to keep up with wherever it's been turned to. It can be slightly awkward to push the ring back into autofocus mode if the gears that are hidden behind aren't quite in correct alignment. The lens displays just a little focus breathing, as you can see here, nothing to worry about too much though. Something else to note is that the focus ring works very smoothly with the focus motor, not something to be taken for granted on a Fuji lens. The lens's autofocus motor works very nice and quickly, as you can see here. It is accurate, but makes a slight whooshing sound as it works. The lens comes with a plastic hood, which is nice and deep considering the wide angle we're working at here, and its front filter size is 67mm wide. It does not feature image stabilization. Overall, this lens has exceptional, tough build quality. It is the kind of lens you'd want to take shelter behind in the event of a nuclear war, really, but that focus clutch mechanism is a bit clunky. Alright, let's take a look at image quality now. I'm testing it on a Fuji X-T3 camera with its 26 megapixel aps-c sized sensor. At f1.4 in the middle of the image, sharpness is just okay. Contrast is a little low, and there's some ghosting on contrasting edges. Over in the image corners, things get really quite ghostly really, there's no other way to put it. Stop down to f2 for a small improvement, particularly in contrast in the corners. Back in the middle, we now see excellent sharpness. Sharpness remains this good at f2.8. Over in the corners, image quality is looking far better there, and stop down to f4 for excellent sharpness in the corners. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, where a little softness begins to emerge due to the effects of diffraction. Overall, well, as I mentioned before, early reviews of this lens put question marks over its image quality even on a 16 megapixel camera. Well, technology has quickly moved on, and now that we're working on as much as 26 megapixel cameras, the lens has been somewhat left behind. For a $1,000 optic, it's just not sharp enough at its brightest apertures. And yes, I know I face the wrath of a few Fuji users in saying that, but if we're talking about sharpness alone, that's just the deal. Okay, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting. I have taken and processed these images in RAW in order to get around Fuji's in-camera corrections. However, we only see negligible barrel distortion here. Vignetting at f1.4 is very strong though. Stop down to f2 and most of the darkness in those corners clears up, although stopping down any further than that doesn't lead to further improvements. A nice bonus feature of this particular lens is its very close minimum focus distance of only 16 centimeters, which is very impressive. The further good news is that, even at f1.4, close-up image quality isn't any worse than it was at normal focus distances, although we do see some purple fringing at this maximum aperture. Stop down to f2 to see it go away, leaving behind some excellent sharpness, so it is a great lens for close-up photography. Now let's see how the lens works against bright lights. We see a small drop in contrast and some fairly broad but also quite translucent flaring patterns, a slightly better than average performance here. And while we are working in the dark, let's take a look at chroma levels. At f1.4, bright points of light in the corners see some pretty clear smearing, which will be an annoyance for astrophotographers. It is reduced at f2, and at f2.8 it's gone. Let's zoom out now and look for some sun stars. You have to stop down to f11 or f16 for those to make an appearance, although on this copy of the lens, the aperture blades didn't quite seem evenly aligned. Let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh now. It's just okay here. Those out of focus backgrounds never look horrible, but they have a slight edginess to them that means they're never super soft either. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f1.4, we see a fair bit of colour fringing on out of focus highlights. That is reduced at f2 and gone at f2.8, leaving behind a nice clear image. Overall, well, I think this lens might be one of the reasons Fuji have just brought out their new and truly excellent 18mm f1.4 optic, which can have this older lens for breakfast at the same price. I do know that the 16mm lens is popular with those Fuji shooters who can afford it, but in my tests, it's just not worth anywhere near $1,000. However, sharpness isn't everything, and if you don't care about capturing loads of detail at f1.4, then it can still get you some beautiful images. Well, that was interesting. If you're a Fuji fan who's not feeling completely wound up by this review, or if you're someone who just happens to find these reviews helpful, then check out my Patreon page down in the description below, where supporters of this channel can find all kinds of exclusive bonus content. Ciao everyone.